don't need a high-end designer or a lot of money to get a luxe look. Be your own interior designer.
This is Affordable Interior Design, the podcast.
Here's your host, Betsy Helmuth.
My first question comes from Amelia. Amelia is writing from Canada, and she writes, "Hi, Betsy. Is it okay to have a dining table in the center of a kitchen instead of an island? Is there a way to make it look intentional and stylish? We have an older home and we're saving up to update it. You can see in the photos that we have very little counter and cabinet space. The kitchen is square and it is a good size, but the house does not have a dining room. The adjacent living room is too small to make sense and make space for a dining table. The only other option would be to remove a wall and make one of our spare bedrooms into the dining room. We're concerned about this because it feels like maybe we're taking some value away from the home. We think the kitchen is big enough to have cabinets around 3 of the walls and a dining table in the middle. But is this a terrible choice? Maybe it won't age well. Ideally, we'd like the table to be taller so it could be comfortable to do food prep on. Are there certain styles that work better for something like this? We're a bit more rustic farmhouse, and we think that look would go well with the rest of our house, being that it's older. Thank you for your input." So as I was reading this, Amelia, as I was looking at the pictures, it just so reminded me of Roseanne. Did you ever watch Roseanne growing up? So she had a dining table sort of right in the middle of her kitchen. And so these pictures really harkened back to that kind of feeling. And I think it was so nice because it really was the hub of not only the TV show, but of their home seemingly. So much action happened in that kitchen while somebody was preparing a snack or a meal, while other people were at the table. I mean, it was just such a hub, right? But at the same time, if I had a dining table in the middle of my kitchen, I'm worried that it might become somewhat of a crap collector. That if I had limited counter space, which it looks like you might have, I only have 2 angles of this. But if I did have limited counter space, it might become that prep station. Now, of course, if I was using it every night, I'd be clearing it off regularly. So I guess that would be okay. But it is one of the traps of having a dining table right there in the middle of your kitchen. So whether or not you should have it there, for me, is a lifestyle question. And also the height of it is a lifestyle question. High top, like countertop or bar height dining tables are really fun. And they tend to be a more casual vibe. So if you don't have dinner parties, if you don't eat formally, and if you don't have small children, I think the high top could make a lot of sense because you could use it as a prep area without having to bend down. It's at that nice level that just feels sort of organic. And maybe even if you're super casual eaters, you could have stools that tuck right underneath. So you don't even have to push chairs out of the way to sidle right up and chop your onions or whatever you're doing. That could make it a really kind of streamlined piece that could flow beautifully and function impeccably in a space that has to do sort of double duty island dining area. If you do have young children, if you do like to entertain and have dinner parties, I think a high top is not going to be all that comfortable. And it's also not going to be all that conducive to having guests. There are very few high top dining tables that have extension leaves. I would be inclined, based on your lifestyle, if you had kids, if you entertain, to get just a standard height dining table and get one that extends so that day to day it can be just the right size for that island or for nightly dining. But then you can have people over without feeling like limitations. Now, normally around a dining table, you need 30 to 36 inches to pull out your chair without hitting anything else, like a wall, a buffet, a hutch, a console. And I would recommend having even more room than that in the middle of a kitchen because I want to open the dishwasher, open the stove, do the dishes. Maybe somebody's coming behind me. So I would recommend 48 inches on either side. And as I'm eyeballing these pictures, I think that's possible here. But as you're choosing the width of your table, I would be quite mindful of having that extra room to move around. I would also be mindful that the table's materials need to work seamlessly with the kitchen's materials. So, right now you have a mid tone to light wood table with mid tone to light wood chairs. Meanwhile, the cabinets are white doors, and then the actual frame of the cabinet is like a dark wood. And so for me, it not only feels incongruous spatially, like sort of plopping a table in the middle of the kitchen, but it also feels incongruous stylistically. So I would want to make sure if the table has any wood elements that wood coordinates with the woods from the cabinet. I want to make sure that this space feels really cohesive rather than you just taking a dining room from your old space and plopping it in the middle of this room and trying to make things work. If they really look good together, if they look like one cohesive unit, it's going to feel less disjointed and awkward. And then also, you want to think about the materials you're using. If I was going to have a dining table and chairs right in the middle of my kitchen, I would make sure to avoid fabric or upholstered chairs because they're going to absorb the grease and smells from the kitchen. Instead, I would skew more towards leather or pleather chairs. If I had a marble countertop, I would avoid having a marble dining top table. You don't want them to look like they're supposed to be the same if they're not. So, all these things are things to keep in mind as you're selecting your new dining table. I do think there's a lot of value to having extra rooms in your home in terms of extra bedrooms. So I understand your hesitancy to knock down the wall. But if you're not planning on moving from here, and reselling, which is sort of why you were hesitant to remove that wall. If you're not planning on doing it for 5 to 10 years, I say do whatever makes the most sense for your family and your lifestyle because I think living somewhere for 5 to 10 years and having it really flow and work for you is so much more important than resale value. After 5 to 10 years, you will have gotten years and years of value out of whatever arrangement you chose, and you can easily put the wall back up, and it will have been worth the investment to both take it down and erect it. But the one person you want to ask, perhaps, about how this structural change would impact your resale value is a real estate agent. Because so many times people come to me and they say, Betsy, I'm considering these changes, but I really don't know if it makes sense. And I tell them, if you're worried about resale, if you're trying to decide on a renovation because you're wanting to recoup that value in the future, talking to a real estate agent is key because they're in the market of reselling. And I'm in the market of making your interior design dreams come true and making your home more functional for you, not for somebody else that we don't even know in the future. So I hope that helped and gave you a lot of clarity, Amelia. Thanks for writing in. Let us know what you do, by the way. I'm very curious to see how this all shakes down. A big thank you to Aton and the Embassy who wrote our theme song. A shout out to Catherine Heller who owns the podcast shop and is our editor extraordinaire. We also want to thank Ginny Sunasan and her team at the Savvy Podcast Agency for their help with our social, our YouTube channel, and so much more. We also want to thank Uploft, which is our parent company who supports this podcast. And lastly, we owe a huge debt of gratitude to you. Thank you so much for tuning in and for all your support.